Uh, Good afternoon and good morning to some of you who haven't made it to noon yet. Thanks for joining us. I'm going to be taking you through, it says Application Managed Services 101. We are going to get into some, 201 and 301 concepts. As we go through, like Caitlin said, just put a question in the chat box and we'll jump in. Today, we're going to be covering what you saw in the webinar. We're going to talk about the basics, some key benefits, what AMS is, why why we use it in a business setting, and then some things to think about when you're thinking about AMS. But first, what is AMS? You saw that it's Application Managed Services. This is always worthwhile. I've been doing this for a while, and sometimes there's confusion, but it's great to start out with what is a managed service. And I have a picture of a pool here, because almost anything you can imagine as a managed service, and a pool is like an easy example. A pool needs to be taken care of, chlorine checked. It might be a commercial setting. You need a lifeguard. It needs to be opened, closed. This is something that you can contract out and you can have done, and the whole operations of a pool be taken care of. So this would be, in this example, it's a managed service as a pool. And you can use your imagination and go on. And something that probably most of you are familiar with, payroll. I've only seen one business out of maybe a few hundred that have actually done payroll in-house. Most businesses use payroll as a managed service, and there's some here, ADP, so keeping track of that tax, Social Security. We as businesses, that's not our specialty. There's a lot involved, and it makes more business sense to have that function managed for us. We don't do payroll services at Columbus, but one thing you're also probably familiar with is managed service for infrastructure managed services, which is the care and feeding of network, switches, traffic, security, Active Directory. Columbus does do this, but that's not the focus today is on applications, and so we'll talk more, go in depth about what it means to be a managed service for an application. And here's here's the clinical definition. I'm not going to read it, but it's talking about the strategy that you embark as a company when you get your ERP or CRM here. You can see the Microsoft Suite, the various dynamic products, but it's adopting best practices. It's getting a roadmap. It's getting a strategy. It's covering all your skills that you need to operate successfully. Because when you make that investment in the ERP, whether it's a new implementation or whether it's an upgrade, the idea is that I want this investment to pay off, provide me more functionality. Well, how do I do that? I need to keep on top of the application, and I need to utilize the application in other ways. There's new functionality coming out. How do I find out about that? So I show some Microsoft products there, but application managed services also crosses over into some add-ons. I show reporting tools like Power BI, Jet Reports, Atlas, Avalara is a tax add-on, and you can see some shipping add-ons. So it's not just the application that you're using as an ERP. It would be anything connected to that ERP. Your managed service might not be an expert in that piece, but they would facilitate, like talking to, say, Avalara if there was a tax problem in your application that couldn't be solved within your application managed services provider. So application managed services, I'm going to cover this in two sides, the key benefits, and I'm going to give you, you see the reactive services up here, but I'm going to show you the slide ahead too, so you can keep this in mind, which is the proactive side. And the proactive services. Let's talk about the reactive services. This is classically what we think about in support. They're reactive. It's incident management. I'm stuck. How do I do this? The system won't post. Um, I would expect in this type of we would expect in this type of environment there to be some service response times or SLA, service level agreements. How fast will my issue get fixed? I can't print payroll checks. I can't post a journal. I can't print a shipping list. I can't get my freight forwarded. Integration is broken. These are reactive services that are all included when in the healthcare and feeding of your applications. On the proactive side, we're actually taking a strategic view and looking forward. So things like release or change management. So change management might involve new customizations, new functionality. I want to add barcode scanners to the warehouse. I want to use a different module. I want to create a different integration. Then the release of that into your system, but not only for enhancements and customizations that you make, right? It's could be your release management could be an update of your UAT or development environment. A lot of times we lag in troubleshooting a copy of the live or the production environment to a sandbox or to a UAT environment where we can effectively troubleshoot and you want to see it. So a best practice would be to develop a frequency on how frequently that's updated. So we know the frequency, we know when it's updated. Yeah, sure, sometimes we might have to update it at the last minute, but we can be assured, say, that our data in there is a month old, so we feel comfortable. The other piece of the proactive service is the governance or the operational agreement. When you enter into application managed services, you're actually making agreement with the provider of what services that you want. So your system has a lot of bases to cover. Do you want some of those bases covered? Do you want all those bases covered? What does it look like? Obviously more complicated than the pool example I gave, but I hope that paints a picture on the flexibility of the reactive and the proactive service and how you might go about, deciding what you need. This is just an example, and it shows a good example of our customers. It shows how you would use or what a typical representation of your application managed services would be. So if you're looking at this, you see the reactive side on that 25% how to sort of training, I'm stuck, process issues, but then you see new customizations, functionality. Reporting could fall somewhere in the middle of that. It might be a reactive report or it might be a proactive report. Also within the application side, we do get into a bit of system administration and performance. It's unavoidable. It's my application's running slow. How do we go about that? That can be attributed to code or customizations or the way you have integration set up that's not running as efficiently. And that's something that can be done in an application managed services environment and doesn't necessarily fall to the infrastructure. So in a performance problem, we start with the application. We see what the application is. Oftentimes, the resolution is in the application and it's not necessarily in your hardware or your infrastructure, or that your cloud provider is too far. Usually it involves database locks, inefficient code, queries locking up different places. So we do address that in application. So why, oh, mine is just jumping all over the place here. So why would you need an AMS or an operations partner? Really, the things you see on the screen, they all depend on your situation, but the one that we see over and over again is access to skill and talent, because the application's grown so wide and your staff has a certain amount of skills, and you have the appetite to use the application more. And um, with the increasing cloud component, the complexity of your solutions, or how much more you want to do, you it's having access to all those skills and being flexible to not use that skill or this skill is really like a huge benefit on why an operations partner or an AMS service provider would be beneficial. Business productivity and efficiency, cost, those blend in too. So for when you're weighing this, for the cost of AMS services, you get a blend that you might not be able, that you wouldn't be able to get with a single hire. And then this is where the managed service falls in the model. When you think about, well, I'm using vendors to do things that maybe I should be doing in-house. And if you look over on the left, you'll see a staff augmentation model. A staff augmentation model simply means that I've gone out and it's a temp situation. You're paying a temp premium. You're in charge of managing that resource, figuring out what they have to do, how they have to do. The vendor up at top has low accountability. All that they're accountable for is that person shows up with the right skills and right attitude to accomplish whatever you need. If you decide that's not, they switch out. The vendor doesn't make any determination on your business whether that's a fit. Um, on the other side, in a managed services environment, that proactive piece comes in. We have different resources who are assigned. We're in contact. There's more accountability on our side as a provider, and then this way there's less customer risk, because the customer can come to the managed service provider for that expertise, or what's my next step in this part. And in that operational agreement also, we're contacting you. We're agreeing that we're going to perform at this level for these services. Here are the set of skills that, depending on what your solution is, you may run into. Maybe you only have a finance and accounting solution, but then you might have on the left side, there's functional skills, and then on the right side, there's technical skills. In a simple application managed services agreement, you have access to all these skills as you see fit with what your business is trying to accomplish. Caitlin, are there any questions at this point?
Yes, we did have a couple questions that were submitted. The first one is, my solution looks small compared to what you have described here. Do only big companies use this type of application managed services?
That's interesting. So it's a little bit about the history of managed services. Managed services was it started off as a big company thing. And so what immediately comes to my mind is a Ford, a Pepsi type of situation, where they would actually outsource their accounts payable department, like they outsource a whole department. What's happened with the economy and the digital economy, managed services for things such as Dynamics applications have become more cost efficient. And so whether you need a bunch of services with a big solution, or you think your solution is rather small and I only need a few, what we offer And what a managed service provider should offer, is they should offer that flexibility to consume as much as you want or to consume as little as you want. If you had a follow-up, just type it in there and Caitlin will read it to me.
Yes, definitely. And say our next question is, at my company, my in-house IT staff has it all covered. I'm still not sure if this is useful to my company.
And I've seen this too. This comes back, and we'll drop into the. You read my mind. This comes to the next my next slide. It gets into your business needs. If you have it all if you have it all covered, have you done the analysis of your business? Do you have an appetite for anything else? So what we've seen is when companies have it all covered and then they start looking deeper into their needs, they see, well, I have my current situation covered, but I don't think I really have my future roadmap covered. So I have six really skilled IT staff, men and women, but I really want them to be doing proactive work. They seem to be doing reactive work. I need them to do some other, I need them to concentrate on another functionality. So a managed services would allow that company to shift resources. Like, and sometimes I'm specifically talking about an example in my mind where the company saw this and they actually decided to give managed service provider. They said, we're going to give you the easy work and we want to take on the hard work. And the reason for that was it was a lower cost because they knew they had the skills to go on to something further. um, a good another one might be, in a transition of business needs, if you're putting on a system or going into something, you may not have, you may be okay now, but the same story, I guess. You may be okay now, but when you go live, I don't have the skills to support what I think I'm going to support, and how do I support those? So it's looking at it really is looking at your business needs, and you might have it covered. And there are companies that do have it covered, so that's not definitely not out of the possibility. Let's just jump into. I alluded to some, what skills do we need? What systems do we have? What skill do we want to deploy? Who has the expertise? So when you say who has the expertise, do I have the expertise in staff, or do I want to do I want a vendor to do it in an AMS solution, or do I really think it's better if I build an internal team? What's that cost way? Other things to consider is, I've already mentioned, the ability to scale up and scale down, because some in your life cycle of your ERP system, you may be scaling up, but at the same time, we do see companies scaling down, and we can still assist with that. Meaning, and the reason for the scale down, important to note, is they're purchased by a company that doesn't have their ERP system, and they aren't slated to go to that mother company's ERP system for 2 years. So what do they do in those 2 years? They don't just want to keep their same dynamics functionality. They want to tweak it. They want to get more out of it. They're not going to overspend on it, but the 2 year horizon, a lot changes in their business and a lot of things that they need to cover. So that scalability is important. 24/7 mention, like all providers should be able to provide 24/7. Um, you might not need continuous 24/7, but you would probably advisable to consider emergencies, and that's on a business by business. If you haven't had an emergency in 10 years, you probably don't need, but still the fact that your provider has 24/7, even if you don't contract it, is something to consider. Operational and strategic governance, which is the umbrella of this, is being aware of your system and how you're going to use it. The key is to begin now to think about those needs, whether you're thinking about it from a requirement standpoint, what do I have, a transition standpoint into a new project or finishing up a project, and thinking about what your cost spend benefit analysis would be. Who is the one to do this? What should be done? Um, how can I get the expertise to the skills that I need? So I just wanted to thank you guys and women for listening. I will be in contact with any other questions that you might have, and I wanted to wish you a good day. Thank you.